Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at your education, I'm always intrigued at the thought process that goes behind, because I'm a very strategic person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also and when I mean, like, I'm a strategic person, but I'm also a reader. So like now I'm actually reading about MBAs. I'm not going to go back to school for it, but I'm the type of person who's like, I'm going to learn. I know what I want. I know what I'm willing to invest the time and a degree in, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
also willing to understand things that I know that just discipline and read and understand things
Mm-hmm.
from, I know, okay, what can I do that I can just kind of sit down and be taught? And then
Mm-hmm.
some things that I need assistance, and so I need to sit in the classroom. So when I look at the the way, how did you determine human services versus me as a person choosing clinical mental health to do, so like I'm always intrigued by that.
That's a great question. It's gonna sound crazy. I wanted a degree in counseling. I just didn't feel like going 60 credits. I didn't want to do an extra year because I knew if I just had the degree, I could make it work for what I wanted to do. Plus, I have a human service degree specialized in Christian ministry. I already had a plan on how I was going to marry the two together. And I'm actually living that out right now because I create mental health ministries with churches. I have a couple churches that I work with, especially one here in Delaware, that I do the mental health ministry for the church. The church pays me, the person pays me what they can, the church pays the balance, and then the person gets the services that they need. And I'm able to talk about the Christian faith without the specter of insurance companies over my shoulder telling me what I can and cannot talk about. I really don't work with insurance companies other than when I'm working with Medicaid, simply because to get my therapy license, I have to go through the supervision. I actually don't want a therapy license because I don't need it. But at this point, I said, well, I already took the test once. I got to take it again. I might as well just sit down and really, truly study and get it, simply because if I want to start my own practice in terms of dealing with insurance companies, but that's not something I aspire to, and it's not actually part of the plan. So for me, the human service counseling specialized in Christian ministry allowed me to do that. I also chose Liberty University because I wanted a degree from a school that would trick people into having a conversation with me, because I chose a far right school that favors Republicans for that reason. So a lot of times when they see that school, they automatically think I might not be one of those people of color. So it allows me to get into spaces that I might not have got into if I went to another school. And I chose that for a reason, to be strategic. I also wanted to see what was actually being taught, if there was a whole different style of tea. And there is a little bit difference in terms of how they go about things at a far right school, but I don't get into all that because I was doing it online and I could work at my own pace to a degree. But yeah, my choices was that the way the degree was structured, it covered a lot of the things that I needed to know about, because I had a plan on creating these ministries with churches. It's working. I just need to continue to build on it. And my ultimate goal is to be able to create a database that when churches buy into it, they then have access to clinicians who are connected to the faith, who could present to them what they need, and the churches help fill that gap. Because the biggest thing that people say, besides for not going to counseling, is one, because of course how they were raised, they didn't believe in it. I got that. That's a color thing. We can deal with that. But at the end of the day, it's I can't afford direct pay. So they have to rely on insurance companies. Well, as long as you got to rely on insurance companies, somebody else is going to dictate your care. I've never been a fan of that. So by doing it the way I'm trying to do it, is I'm literally working on building a database of multiple clinicians. So when a church says, I want to do business with you, okay, here's 20, here's 25, or eventually here's 100 different clinicians that are connected to the faith that your parishioners will have access to. And that's how I believe that we're supposed to use the church, where the church is supposed to be paying for the services of people who can't afford it. Now, the person has to have skin in the game. They got to offer something. So whatever I discount my prices to, if a person can only afford $50, $60, $75, and that's all they can afford, okay, they pay that, and the church pays the difference. And they still get the quality care. I still get paid, even though it's at a discount. And the church now has provided for their parishioners, which causes the parishioners, one, to want to come to church. Two, they can't say, well, I don't know where the tithe money is going. Well, now you see. And it's a win-win-win for all three, because who's going to stop going to their church if they like the services that I'm providing? And as an outsider who's not a member of the church, people feel more comfortable sharing with me because they know that their business is not going to be all over the church. So there's a lot to it. So to your question, I chose the degree, the pathway that I went, because I knew coming out of education, it was something that was going to be necessary for my overall planning.
That was cool. I could really chew on that. I really can, because that's kind of the same reason why I went to Spring Arbor. Um,
We have to create our own
because
pathways. We have to.
that's the reason why I went to Spring Arbor, because I come from a missionary Baptist
Mm-hmm.
upbringing as far as my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents are concerned, but
Okay.
my parents are Seventh-day Adventists, and I am also a Seventh-day Adventist.
Gotcha.
So, however, my parents have always taught me that my mom always told me it's okay to be poor, but there's no excuse to have a piss poor mentality.
Exactly.
And so when it came time for me, I've always was interested in sororities. But when it came time for my dad's side of the family, aka my mom is Delta, none of that made any sense to me. So when it came time for me, I decided to be myself. And so I joined a multicultural sorority, because
Mm-hmm.
that's who I am, and then that's how I see myself. And I never want to be in a room where I am willingly being ignorant. And
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have these safe spaces to have conversation with women and ask the correct questions. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's called a hijab. Oh, this when it's just this is a hijab. When it's this, is another. To have these safe spaces to have conversations with people who look like me but have a different culture than me, and
Mm-hmm.
stop lumping people all together, and have these conversations. For, like you said earlier, conversations are very important for me.
Exactly.
Understanding is very important for me. So I never forget when I joined a multicultural, my family looked at me like I was weird, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. Even my great uncle on my dad's on my mom's side, he
Mm-hmm.
was a Kappa, and he told me, he said, my family nickname is Nikki. He said, Nikki, when I was coming up, it being a part of a fraternity was a safe haven for a young Black man who was
Mm-hmm.
from the South, who needed an opportunity, somebody to look out, somewhere, a couch to sleep on, a couple of dollars in your pocket. You trying to work hard to go somewhere and you can't get into it. That's what it was for a young Black man back then. But he said, "Nah, I don't recognize it. So I will never wear my letters, because I don't understand the vision. I don't understand where they're going, because I don't recognize the organization that made a difference in my life." And
I
so
got you.
when I got of age to make a decision, and he said, "Follow who you are, where you are, and where you can get to the next phase in your life." And for me, the best decision at the time as a senior in college, because I waited, he told me, he said, "Don't do nothing your freshman year because you're
Mm-hmm.
stupid." He said, "Don't do nothing your freshman year because you're stupid. You don't know who you are. You don't know what you stand for. You don't know what your goals, your missions.
It changes. It
You
changes as you get. He's right, because as you get to your junior and senior year, now the focus when you first get there is just happy to be there. Then it's getting along, and then by your junior year, it's kind of like, let me start zeroing in, because now you've moved into taking classes in your area of study, or you've already changed your major once or twice, whatever. But as you get to your junior and senior year, now you can start to lock in. My son, I have a bunch of kids. My son, who just graduated in December, one of the things I had told him a couple years back was that, start your internships towards once you figure out what it is that you wanted. So once he figured out what he wanted, he started doing the internships. Well, he graduated in December, but last summer when he finished up the second year of the internship, they gave him an offer like, hey, when you graduate, if you want, we have this for you. So he graduates in December, this past December, and he walks into being a young accountant of color, making $60,000 at 23 years old, because he did the steps in his his sophomore and junior year, instead of doing a lot of other things that other people might have been doing. And I said to him, learn from the things that I know. If somebody had maybe put my ear to some things and I had did some things differently, there's a whole lot more money I can make. I'm comfortable now, or getting even more comfortable. But the idea is that this is how you use college, even with the fraternities. He's a member of the fraternity. It's never been my thing, because I don't like being told what to do. So I would never be able to make it in fraternities. But I do understand their power. And I do understand if you leverage it. But like anything in life, it comes down to, one, how you see it, two, and how you leverage it. There's negatives in everything. But if you can leverage it the right way, you literally can put yourself in a position where you can get what you want from it, be okay with it. And if money is your thing, that'll be there. Or if money's not your thing, but you're just trying to establish yourself, whatever you want is there. You just have to decide how you want that to be. So
I just really like that quote. Do you use any community resources?
all the time, if I can,
Is there
whatever's
a
available.
lot? Because like
If there's organizations or people, online, virtually, locally, the PTAC office here in Delaware is the one that helped me get the contract that I have with the school up north of Delaware, where I'm at, about 40 minutes away. Online resources is what helped me get the contract last year with the federal government. I use whatever's available to me, as well as the people inside my business circles, because I have a business coach. And anybody, that's one thing I can tell you: if you have a business coach, your business coach should be bringing resources to the table for you, as well as a community for you to pull from. So I use that. I use whatever is available for me to be able to help whoever I'm helping. That's the reason why I give as much as I give, or I try to stand on the things that I stand on, because if you don't, then you leave the door for somebody to say you never did, which then they start to pull resources back. And they also start to tell other people that you're not forthright with who you say you are and stuff like that. So I have a real simple motto, and it's real simple. I say this to everybody: you have to be comfortable with setting the table for somebody else to eat, and trusting that once they sit down to eat, they're going to turn to you and say, aren't you going to join us? But at first, you have to set the table for them. And I do that. Now, that doesn't mean that every time somebody sits down and eat, they're going to turn around and offer you. Sometimes they're going to sit down and they're going to eat up everything and run off. And you got to be okay with that. But this is where, as a person of faith, there's just certain parts that you have to understand, that you have to be okay and trust your particular faith. And that's where a lot of people get in trouble. They claim to be part of the faith and then struggle with actually believing the very thing that they claim. That's one of the reasons why with churches, sometimes I get on churches' nerves because of the fact that I'm very versed in the Bible itself, but I don't pull any punches and I really don't mix my words. So you can feel whatever way you feel about what I'm about to say, but I see scripture for what it is. I don't see scripture by the way somebody wants me to see it. And a lot of times I'll call people on that, and all of a sudden it's so, but that's part of it. If we can't claim something and then not actually try to live by it, if that's what the word says. So That's what I do. So yeah, I use whatever resources I can get my hands on, and I'll call up folks and whatever I can do, because by helping somebody else, I always believe it comes back home.
You know what? I what I've learned so far just in this journey
Hmm.
is that you is you have to you have to meet people where they are
Very true.
and realize that everyone you meet has the right to believe what they believe. And it's not our responsibility to alter those beliefs, but to come and give another perspective. And I think that's the thing that's where I'm learning is that people shape their belief based on their lived experience, their interactions with the people that they've been around. And a lot of times we come into a situation being an authority figure in people's life, but really our responsibility is to give people the space to speak. And upon our ability to build a therapeutic relationship with them, gain
Hmm.
that trust, and as you use the self disclosure correctly, then you can help see a different perspective and allow them to say, you know what, I never really thought about it that way. That's all you need for them to, you don't need them to accept your belief. You just need them to be willing to take a nugget and let that grow at a later date. And I think that's the part, because sometimes when you're reading textbooks on, group counseling or this type of counseling, if you're not careful, it's like, well, the counselor's job is to direct them and guide them into a direction. And I'm like,
Hmm.
then you kind of, in a way, we're manipulating them in a way. And so, I'm very I'm very outspoken in my courses because I'm a words person. Um,
Gotcha.
words have its own meaning. It's just like an example. If and you work with couples, so you probably
Hmm.
heard this say, "We're locked in."
Hmm.
And you hear it, what do you think of?
Two people that are connected to similar mindset. So if they're talking about locked into each other, then I automatically assume that it's because there are they're having the same mindset of things going on. So that's what it sounds like to me when I hear somebody's locked in. Or if it's an individual thing, then it's a particular way of thought, that they're locked into a particular way of thinking, which then I'm like, okay, I understand that too. So if it's positive, but then the goal is to recreate it, to rinse and repeat it, as they say, or if it's negative, then the goal is to get them to release it and replace it with something else.
And so actually what I've, you know, I've learned that we're locked in is another way for we're in a relationship.
Hmm.
But if
Gotcha.
by me not being in that community where that is lingo, I didn't know what that meant. I had
Hmm.
no idea what that meant. So that's why words are so important because groups of people create meaning of words and there's an understanding based on what that means. So, you know, I have an adolescence unit at my hospital and we were doing groups
Hmm.
and we were talking about because a lot of time most adolescents who are in my hospital, in the hospital, it's not my hospital, they're there because of relationship issues,
Hmm.
heartache. And so, we sit down with the treatment team and we come over our groups and we were talking about relationships. And during our group sessions, and I threw the word "we're locked in," and there's 12 kids there, and all 12 of these kids have a different understanding of that term. You guys are in a secure relationship, you guys are official, you guys are going together, you guys are boyfriend and girlfriend, all these different things. And then, then you had another student to say, we're locked in, you're not going anywhere. We're in this for life. And so now it's like, whoa, a simple term, like you said, can be positive and it can go on that slippery slope where it can be an abusive, but it's the same words. We're locked in. So, I say all that to say is that even how I approach the only thing I didn't like about my program so far is that I felt like the order in which the courses went in, I had to make a lot of decisions too early in the program. And the theoretical orientation, that was like our third class. And I felt like I was locked into something a lot early than I didn't, because, that played into your group theory, your group theory courses, because you was building upon that. So how are you going to do that? So early on, I chose Atlarian because it connected where I was in that moment and I could see myself in it at the time. But now that I'm in the course, I realized I connected with it in a way because it was personal and I understood the birth order because I'm the baby of the family and I could see how I had to so I understood it from a more personal connection. But as far as the philosophy of who I am as a person, it's not my thing. However, however, as you find your way in that, I realize words matter. So now I'm more so I'm I'm rereading the therapy orientations and narrative therapies, sort of speaking to me more because of based on how we're having this conversation and what is my strengths and those things like that. And I understand a lot more because I'm going into my second year. Well, I'm completing my second year because I have clinicals in July. And so I guess I guess I lost my question in a way, but because I was so excited. Um I guess I say all of that to say is that how do you, because you said your 10-year audience is 35 to 70.
Yeah, women between the ages of 35 and 70. But I'm open to everybody, but that's my target audience.
Your target audience. How do you handle language barriers
With
with cultural norms of slang and because relationships, because the recovery process, when you look back and they come in, they say, well, this person did X, Y, and Z, and
but language doesn't differentiate. The language doesn't differ that. I'm on social media, so I'm familiar with all the things that are going on right now. Language is not an issue unless it's a foreign language, meaning that if a person is Spanish speaking, I can't speak Spanish, so I would either need an interpreter or I'm not the counselor for you. But in terms of colloquialisms, now language is language. I can speak to anyone from anywhere as long as I have a basic understanding. If they're speaking English, it's not a problem because all language, all colloquialisms, all forms of language, whether it's the streets, and I code switch with the best of them, is all going to be connected to some overall theme. So whether I'm in the hood and I'm in the streets, you're going to hear the way I talk. And when I'm in a meeting where my education has to speak for me, you're going to understand the way I talk. And I think people understand that and react to that. And then for me, I'll just ask, what do you mean by that? What does that mean? I think that's the thing that people are scared to do. Okay, if somebody uses a phrase that I may not be aware of, and every environment has its own subtleties. But if there's a particular phrase that I'm not aware of, I may say, what do you mean by that? But most phrases that you hear, if you're in social circles like TikTok or other things like that, you're going to see or hear all of the phrases put into motion. And once you have an idea of what it's connected to, it's no difference. And I listen to some of the same music that folks listen to, from young to old to whatever. So there's not a lot of places that something new is going to be introduced that I don't have an idea of what's being said. And again, all you have to do is listen. The conversation with listening is the same as when you don't understand something when you're reading. They tell you to read behind it, read ahead of it, it'll give itself away. Well, same thing with listening to somebody talk. Somebody's talking about a relationship and they're using colloquialisms. You'll get the gist of it as they explain it, because people tend to want to be heard. So they will make it clear what they're trying to say. Or they'll say, I don't think you're getting me. Let me try to say it another way. So they'll correct it for themselves. All I have to do is be attentive, and you just have to be honest. Like I coached in Jamaica in 2000. I don't speak patois. I was married to a Haitian woman. I don't speak Creole. But after a while, I got to figure out the dirty words because she was always cursing at me. So I was like, all right, cool. You start to figure certain things out. Now, not being able to speak patois, but I can understand most of the English. So when I listen, when I think of the setting, when I think of the situation, and I can get most of what you're saying, I can figure it out. Or I may say, just slow down a second, let me hear what you're saying, and then you listen, and then, will it make the person a little frustrated? Possibly, but you figure it out fast enough. And some things you can kind of fill in the pieces as you go. Now, depending on how serious the situation is, if I really feel I need every single word, well, then at that point, I may decide to get somebody who can clarify it for me. So if I can say, I missed that, what did they say? And then we go from there. Because now it might be, if we're talking a person looking to talk about a potential suicide or something like that, yeah, I want every word. So now I might have to get someone who specializes in the language to be able to share with me something I missed. But that again goes to the situation. It goes to, why we're having a conversation. But overall, language has never really been an issue for me. And again, as a former educator, I'm trained on how to deal with multiple intellects, and understand multiple pathways to get in, to have those conversations with those intellects. So you go from there.
How did you know you wanted to be a consultant?
Because it's something I've done my whole life. I just didn't know I was going to do it professionally. There's a book called Cure for the Common Life. Yeah, Cure for the Common Life by Pastor Max Lucado. And he talks about, if you want to figure out what your godly purpose is, just live your life backwards. Go back into your life and think of all the things you did easy, things that you did that other people just thought either criticized you for or just did with just utter subtle ease. And for me, it was always running off with the mouth. 2, making people comfortable to talk with me. And my sons used to joke about, Dad, every time we go somewhere, all these crazy people just come and talk to you, whatever. And as you get older, you start to realize that that is your gift. So for me, it's something I've known my whole life. When I wanted to do it professionally, well, again, when I look at my long-standing careers, the time I spent in the streets, 20 plus years teaching, and even my whole life is always spent, I'm the person that people come to when they have a problem. I just realized it was time, I want to say 2014, I think I realized that I wasn't going to teach much longer. So I started thinking, what was I going to go to school to do, or did I even want to go back to school? And then in 2015, when I decided to go back to get my second master's degree, I knew it was going to be in counseling because I had this idea of creating mental health ministries. And I knew I was going to need a particular degree for it. I knew the planning that I wanted to have for it. So at that point, I knew that was going to be what I was going to be. And then as a consultant, well, I'm a paid speaker to begin with. And when I wrote my first book in 2007, and I own my own publishing company, and I've written 6 books. Yeah, I think five or six books, and I'm working on 3 more. And through our publishing company, my wife and I have worked with over 50 something authors, books or whatever. I realized it was just something that speaking and talking and helping people is just something that I do well, that I get paid for it. So once I started getting paid for it, I just rinsed and repeated it and kept doing it, just to get better at it. And I'm still getting better at it because it's something that I do. Like, I don't see myself working for anybody ever again, simply because I don't want to. And I couldn't see myself sitting at someone's job and being told what to do. So the goal is to always get better if I don't plan on working for anybody. Plus, at my age, I don't really want to start working for somebody at 55. Not happening.
I have this question is completely different. How do you know? Okay, writing.
Mm-hmm.
I've I have been writing my whole life, and
Okay.
I've been a published poetry writer since I was like in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
How do you balance the ability? How do you know what to write about? I know that sounds off, but I've
Depends on
literally
what you're thinking. Depends on what you want the book to say. I've written poetry. I'm an award-winning poet. I've been featured in Ebony magazine, which is back there on the wall, 2012. I've written fiction, nonfiction. I've written self-help. It depends on what you're trying to say, what you're trying to do with what you're trying to say, and who you're trying to reach with it. The current book I'm working on now is 12 Steps to Recovering from, where's it at? 12 Steps to Recovering from Toxic Relationships. And a woman asked me, on TikTok, would this be something that I would consider? Sure. And so that got me started on it. So I've been working on it, and I put together the outline because because my logic was, if she wanted or needed that, then somebody else wanted or needed that. And then that's what I actually did. I put the poll out there and asked folks, is this something that y'all be interested in? And every Friday, I'm live on TikTok. So I decided to use my platform that I have on TikTok every Friday, and basically just went through the 12 steps. So we're up to number 5 now. I'm going to go through all 12, and I record them all. And then I'm going to go back and just listen to the recordings and go ahead and write the book or transcribe some of the recordings, so I ain't got to actually say it again. And there's the book, because I'm speaking to what somebody asked me for. So that's what it is when it comes to writing. You have to know, you have to ask yourself, what is it that you're writing for, and who are you writing to? And it takes care of itself. And then, of course, it's the actual work of writing the book and just getting it all down. But that's where the other features, whether you're self-publishing or traditionally publishing. So a lot of that has to do with how you have things in place. If you have traditional publishing, all you got to do is write the book and give it to them. They'll clean it up. They'll do whatever. If you're doing it yourself, yeah, you still got to do all those things, but you're going to do it yourself. But with traditional publishing, they're going to give you money up front. You get what's left overall. Or if you self-publish, you get it all yourself. But then you have to be able to create a need or a want for the book. Yeah, a lot of people out here who have written books and don't sell, simply because they have no market, because they didn't create one. They thought the book was going to create the market. Your book feeds your market, because your book is an extension of you. So you have to make sure that you create the space for your book. If you create the space for your book, well, then at that point, you're good to go. Most people don't do that.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked you that question is because since 2015, I've been working on. I am a Anita Hill. Um, I don't want to say enthusiast, because that sounds a bit weird. Um, my life journey has allowed me to experience things in the workplace as an African American woman, where I've constantly had to speak up for myself. constantly constantly had to help white individuals to understand why these things are offensive.
Hmm.
And oftentimes it is a African American male, and I can understand what he's saying, but when I put it down on paper, they're not understanding how that's inappropriate. And
Yeah,
so
I got you.
oftentimes you find yourself losing your voice in it, and staying to it, and the work environment, and all those types of things. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of but when you said that, it made sense. I think I have a subject title, but I think I have to take myself out. I think the vulnerability to talk openly about these experiences and understand how something so public as something that Miss Anita Hill had gone through, it just goes to
Hmm.
show that when I was 1 years old, I was 1 years old when she was testifying, and here I am, this 33-year-old woman, still, experiencing this
Hmm.
whole, um, like I just recently had to tell a young man at my place of employment, like, please do not touch me. I had to explain, do not touch me. And it's like, and I don't, and it's not being rude, it's just simply hugging for me is an intimate experience. And I only let people within this space who are in that space. But it's just something, there's a breakdown in the communication where it's like, you constantly have to, like, you either, if you're too nice, you're too strong, you're rude, you'll be, oh, yeah. But the simple thing is being able to set boundaries for yourself and enforce those things. You have to make peace with that. Like, I don't like you to touch me. And if that means that we have no dealings with each other, that's perfectly fine. My space and well being is my responsibility. So
Hmm.
it's just one of those things where when you say you were writing, I was like, well, how do you, and and we're seeing those adolescents, working on the adolescents unit sometimes, and we're talking about boundaries, and ask a boy not to sit next to you in school, and all these types of things, and the person, it is, I realized, like, okay, there is a need for this. And so it's like, because if these middle schoolers, middle school is one of the interesting times of your life, because
Hmm.
you're developing, you're finding yourself, you find that voice. It's a quick time to lose your voice. um boys will be boys, and oh, stop being sensitive.
Hmm.
But it's not. These are real, and these are real emotions. These are real things. You don't feel safe. Something about this little boy does not make you feel safe. Why is he walking around me? Even when
Hmm.
when you look backwards about things, the games you play, how a person touched you, how you normalize things. So that's kind of the reason why why I ask. And relationships are, I often tell people that, for me, when I took a pause and I saw myself going down interesting roads, what I realized was the my relationships, whether it was friendships or romantic, were a direct reflection of my immediate family. The relationships I have with my mom, my dad, my sister, and my brother. you know, my, as the baby, my inability to speak up, or my inability to, feel seen, or my inability to, have a voice, or be, you find yourself staying places a lot longer. And once I sat down and did the work, and I realized, oh, I have, I'm really quick to kind of like, you kind of realize, like, oh, because my sister's 11 years older, and my brother was 8. My brother was murdered a year ago. And so you have all these different things. And I'll make this really quick, but I read a book called It Didn't Start With You.
Okay.
And the book was about um, how undoing of generational trauma, and the
Hmm.
explaining of when, a woman is pregnant, there's 3 generations in her. And as she is experiencing trauma, the child that she's carrying is experiencing the trauma. And when a woman is conceived, she has all the eggs she will ever bear at that time within her. So the eggs that are within her are experiencing her grandmother's trauma, her mother's trauma by default. So all that goes. So when you look at a child and you say, man, she acts just like such and such, or she walks just like such and such, she shuts down just like sister. Where did she learn that at? It was marinated into her.
Yeah.
That's that. And once I started to understand that, I started to give myself a break. And so
why men have higher blood pressure, because they believe that fear that was passed on from the trauma there is passed on to young men. That's why men and women of color live longer lives than our Latino and white counterparts. But there's some truth to that.
So that's kind of why I kind of, when I did some reading on, what is your background, what are your, what is your thing from, watching your videos. I said he would be the perfect person to, ask those questions, those views of things of, does he, and I think what was scary for me was that as a woman, is my inability to speak up in the workplace, is that a reflection of how I am in my personal life? And when I saw that history of me not speaking up or me being in a leadership role and men not respecting me, so I had to learn how to find my way. And so that's why I kind of respected how you approach um, your vulnerability. And I appreciated that because um, you have you have, your Kevin Samuels, his approach to
Kevin Samuels Kevin Samuels fed raw meat to people that he knew was going to respond to it, because he originally started out with speaking to men. It didn't make money. So then he switched up with the disrespect to women. And that is what changed the game for him. And that's the problem with someone like him. And now all these other people that are trying to fill the void, and it doesn't make things better, because what it does, it causes people to think that disrespect is acceptable when it's not.
Right.
And so Kevin Samuels, I had a problem with, because he created an environment where he was in control. And then if you didn't give in to his control, then he would disrespect you or cut you loose, which then put him in superior advantage. So it wasn't that he was just super intelligent. It was just that he placed people in situations they couldn't get out of. And then people bought into it because they took it as a challenge to be the person that was going to say something to him. And it was just a waste of time and energy. But people will pay money for drama. So that's why he was able to make the money that he made. But at the end of the day, how much did it really help him when he turns out not only to die early, he dies with the very type of woman that he was disrespecting? So
yeah.
Some of it you just kind of look at and go, okay.
And so I do appreciate your time, and
You're more than welcome.
thoroughly. And my only one last question I have,
Sure.
Given I don't know much about Delaware, but is it very diverse as far as your resources?
There's less than 1 million people here. It's about 1 million people here. That's it. That's why I moved from New York. It's about as diverse as 1 million people can be, but it's somewhat. But the one good thing about Delaware is you have a lot of interracial relationships, because you do have an Air Force base here, so you have a lot of retired military people here. So there are a lot of folks who you would not know are allies who may not be of color. You have the Klan here, and you have other folks that's going to be whatever. So like anything else, there are areas where it is diverse, excuse me, that's not diverse, is not a word, diverse. And then there's areas where people are just going to stick to who they know, white and black, and it is what it is. I think like anything else, it's how you can maneuver it that makes it something special. Like New York, as big as New York City is, it's as segmented off as any place on the planet, but yet there's a whole ton of diversity going on at the same time. It's a matter of you getting in where you can fit in and making it work for you. If you just want to be with all Black folks, you can do that. You want to be with all white folks, you can do that. If you want a mixture, you can do that as well. So I think Delaware is like anywhere else. You make it what you want to make it and go from there.
Advice.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part. What did you say?
Advice for a future consultant, therapist.
Be honest with yourself. I would say to anybody who's thinking about being a consultant, being a therapist, being a counselor, anybody who's going to look to help anybody else, whether teaching, anything else, remember, it's not about you. Remember to meet a person where they are and never stop understanding people. The more you understand people, the more you'll be able to help the people who come to you. So it is not about you. And I noticed that a lot of therapists, especially therapists of color, make it about them, make it about their education, make it about the business itself. And they don't realize that they're sounding or becoming as elitist as some of the same folks who would enslave other folks. So just keep your feet grounded, understand that it's not about you, it's about the help, and just stay in a constant position of learning and wanting to do for other people, and it'll take care of itself. So that's the most generic advice that I would give, because like anything else, you have to decide what that's going to look like for you once you're in it. But that's what I would say to anybody coming in any capacity.
3 books I should read.
That's a tough one, because I don't know. That's a tough one, simply because I don't know what you like, and I don't know what area of counseling you're going to get in, because I personally didn't like any of the books that people suggested that had to do with counseling, because they were all therapeutic and they just felt, read what you like. Read what's going to help you understand the people that you decide you want to work with. I work with women between the ages of, like I said, 35 and 70. So I tend to pay attention to the things that they like. I tend to listen to the things that they listen to. So when I'm talking or when I'm posting something, the music that I choose, all of that speaks to someone in that particular area. So any one particular book, nah, that's a bad question for me, because I particularly don't really care for some of the folks that are considered the quote unquote gurus, because I listen to them and I go, all right, that doesn't do nothing for me, but I know I'm an anomaly. I live in the gray area. So I would just simply say books that are going to help strengthen you in your profession, books that are going to help you understand people, and books that will keep you, like a great book that I just read or listened to is Shonda Rhimes' The Year of Yes. Now, that book, I tell any woman, go look at chapter 8 where she talks about her weight loss, because all women struggle with that. But overall, the book itself is fantastic. Lord, I listen to so many different books. So no, I listen. Like me, Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, fantastic. Like Rich Man, like what is it? Rich, not Rich.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah, I started reading that foolishness.
Oh.
Put it down. What's the other one is Carnegie's Think and Grow Rich, I think is the title of it. But there's another version for Black people, Think and Grow Rich for Black people, whatever. Highly rated book. Oh, you should read it. It's one of the worst books ever, because the person that wrote it was clearly trying to direct people into thinking that racism doesn't exist. He kept saying, now that we have Black people like Oprah and other folks who can really speak freely. And I was like, what? Because he was speaking to the type of people he wants to hang out with. Those are not the type of people that are actually helping people of color. And anytime people say, well, now that we don't have anything. Are we in a better position? Yes, in some areas. But when somebody starts to sell you on, we as Black people now have this. No, we don't. And anytime I read a book that starts to go down that path, I throw it away. Because what you're doing is you're trying to indoctrinate me into thinking that times are not as bad as they were. Actually, times are worse. because we can hide it better now than we could ever before. So, like I said, read what makes you comfortable. And that's going to help you understand people. And there's always books you can choose in field that you can enjoy reading. That's just going to give you that make you technically sound. When you get into the circles that you want to get into, just listen to some of the books of the people that you actually admire, read those, or read the books written by those people that you admire. And all of a sudden you'll see things will move the way it is. Because a lot of those technical books, I just don't read. They don't do nothing for me. I just like to read certain things put out by certain people, and I will make it happen, because at the end of the day, it doesn't take much to learn the business side of it. What it takes is, how do you sustain a connection to the people that you're working with? You can always hire a business coach who will tell you what to do. So that's just me.
And I just want to go back to one question. When we were talking about interventions, when you are working with people, are they often do you work with high suicide rate, or is it more depression or anxiety?
Everything. It all depends on what they reach out for. In the agency that I partner with, I'm working with kids who have disorders, who have had a very abusive issues, and suicide may have been one of the things. So I'm dealing with folks there. In my private counseling, not as much. I've had one or two people who have had suicidal ideation, so I will refer them for psychological advice. And one of the big things that once they go and get a psychological eval, then that makes it easier for me, because once the psychological eval is in place, I now know what I can do or should do. Once the psychologist says this is what you should do, okay, now I have a roadmap to what I want to do. So I have the diagnosis that I need. Now I know what to do, and we go from there. So yeah, so it's I deal with a little bit of everything, but of course, I am a person that people call when they're in crisis. So I am that person when somebody is having that type of situation. But one of the first things I ask, are you contemplating suicide? They say yes. And we have to get away from the misnomer that by asking someone about suicide, we're putting the thought there for them to do it. It's a lie. You're asking because if the person is not sure, or the person is then they might need help right then and there. You don't sit and wait on it. And if that idea of suggestion it was already there, so you send somebody to get help. Even though some schools will say, don't bring it up because they may think about it. They're already thinking about it. Ask, and you're like, so have you thought about it? Yeah, I've thought about it. What it'd be like not to be here. That automatically moves you to, let me refer you to somebody so they can deal with that right then and there. And then we go from there. So, okay.
Yeah. So I only have 4 questions. I didn't want it to be super short. Like, hey, here's my 4 questions.
No, it's okay. I appreciate it. I enjoyed myself. So I thank you. And I appreciate all the compliments and everything, but I thank you. And I wish you well in what you're doing in school. And you have my information. If there's anything else, just send me an email and I'll do what I can or whatever. So I'm here.